Hello again, it's Dan McTeague, President Canadians for Affordable Energy. As promised, I said I would get back to you on a few things that have been preoccupying me, spending a bit of my time on policy and on Twitter, and of course, doing tons of media interviews on the price of energy and its implications for all of us here. Look, we are a small organization. Any help you can give would be certainly appreciated. Affordableenergy.ca. We've made that appeal before. Work that we do today is our benefits that you can receive tomorrow. We've done that with the Clean Fuel Standard. We've done that in terms of our policy work with respects to government initiatives on blocking pipelines. And of course, the effect it has on every single Canadian, which many Canadians probably didn't believe at the outset, but are now starting to come to the conclusion that there is a very serious problem and that much of it can be laid at the feet of bad public policy in this country. I want to talk about bad public policy from the perspective of one of its greatest purveyors. It'll be one Steven Guilbeault. You'll know him as the Minister of Environment and Climate Change, but he is, of course, spending a considerable amount of his time post-activist, and he was a big activist, as many of you know, well known for his work with Equateur and other organizations, scaling towers, harassing the wives of premiers, like Colleen Klein way back when, unfurling banners. But there was a lot more to Steven Guilbeault than I think meets the eye. This is the fellow who is, in a span of a few months, has convinced the government to break its promise on carbon taxes, going from $50 a ton now to $170 a ton, which will cost you and I an extra $2,000 a year for heating and for gasoline and for transportation. I'll come to that more specifically in terms of his background. This is also the same fellow who has brought us the clean fuel regulations or standards, which of course Nova Scotia is only too familiar with right now, with prices having jumped 20 to 30 cents a litre, diesel prices going through the roof, and of course food and other products to follow. This is the same minister who has ridiculously brought about an attack on plastics as if Canada is a problem. It's a solution. Plastics have allowed society to evolve, but now, if that weren't enough, he for an encore, he's now preparing to impose on many provinces a so-called clean electricity standard. Listen, when the word clean and people like Mr. Guilbeault and climate fanatics use that term, they obviously do so without any deference to truth or reality or fact. I have challenged Mr. Guilbeault on many occasions, especially on his Twitter account, because a lot of what he says is frankly and fundamentally dishonest. So let's deal with some of his latest episodes where he's now heading off to China to be part of an organization. Look, I'm a Privy Councillor. I received the title from our work I did for Canadians abroad. Never was I part of another government, or much less an organization that has ties to a communist government, whose government has had a significant amount of explaining to do in terms of its interference with our electoral system. The mere fact that as you and I are, as I'm presenting this to you today, you have a Minister of Environment jetting off, obviously he's not flying using his own arms, jetting off using fossil fuels to go meet with Chinese officials to somehow convince them of a better way, but most importantly, part of an organization, which I don't think he's ever disclosed, that has significant ties to the Chinese Communist Party, is frankly above contempt, below contempt, and above the standards set for our cabinet ministers. Not surprised, since there's no ethics counselor, but this is something that looks a whole lot more like treason than it does, in fact, a good policy move by this particular minister. But I shouldn't be surprised about his affinity with China. Like his leader, who said he admired the basic Chinese dictatorship, there's something about Steven Guilbeault's background that I think a lot of people are not aware of. He's a committed separatist. This is a man who opposed free trade. This is a man who thought Africa should become united, very much in the Marxist theme of raising socialism everywhere, eschewing the West, supporting Huawei when it came to why Wang Mengzhu was in jail, and that this is because of Western telecom companies not liking the competition from Huawei. This was said very recently, by the way, in 2019, 2020, 21. So it's very surprising that some of this has gone under the radar. So let me raise a few more. This is a fellow who, in his much younger years, the 1995 referendum, wanted Canada to leave NAFTA after Quebec separated. So obviously he didn't really care about Canada. This is a guy who made light of the folks that got very sick at Walkerton when you had a disease as a result of contamination of the local water system. This is a fellow who has said that we should abandon our cars, that we should abandon moving to suburbs. This is a person who believes we should raise the price of energy, not just for transportation, but for heating, so that we live with less, so that you and I can learn the lessons. This is all starting to come back to why I think this man is also very much a part of the demonization of hydrocarbons and energy that Canadians use. He's very much a part not of taxing the product in and of itself for greater revenues for government or for the social good, but in fact to curb our behavior, to moralize and tell you what you ought to be doing. Look, for someone who is spending his time cozying up to the Chinese Communist Party, for a fellow who has spent most of his time, his life, advocacy and militant advocacy for things not just on the climate, but on Marxist theology, I think it's really important that Canadians put this in perspective and begin to really question why that man should be anywhere near any cabinet portfolio of any government. The mere fact that Trudeau not only encourages this, but knows full well his background, he would have had to disclose it, is shocking, but not surprising. But perhaps you in Montreal, in Toronto, and Vancouver can finally wake up and smell the coffee, because a lot of you think nothing of this until it comes to knocking on your door with a higher cost of living. Inflation's out of control, higher mortgages, higher rents. What will it take you to finally put people like Mr. Guilbeault where he belongs? If not, in front of a court on charges of treason. Perhaps it's in time for Mr. Guilbeault to at least quit politics and get back to scaling towers and showing us the person that he is, an individual who has already committed that indictable offense, and an individual who, in my estimation, does not have Canada's best interests at his heart. His track record speaks for it. I'm Dan McTeague, President of Canadians for Affordable Energy, 18 years experience as a Liberal member of Parliament. I call a spade, and I'm doing it right now. It's time, Steven Guilbeault and the Liberal cult, to go.